Hello, fellow Civil War gamers, and welcome to another episode of A Game and a Chair, the American Civil War Gaming Club's YouTube series revolving around the WDS Civil War games and all things American Civil War. For more information on the American Civil War Gaming Club, you can check out acwgc.net. The description is in the link below. If you are looking for a place to play turn-based Civil War games, then you will find a home with us. My name is Blake, and as always, I will be the host here of A Game and a Chair. This is just where I share my love for these great Civil War games with you, and where I dive into all sorts of topics dealing with Civil War gaming. In this episode, I'm going to start a new feature here on A Game and a Chair, something called Just My Opinion. I'm going to use this platform to just give you my opinion on whatever topic I happen to be thinking about, or whatever topics people send me. If you have a suggestion, you just want my opinion on something, post it on here, let me know what you want to hear about, and I'll give you my opinion on it. I'm just going to get started in this episode with something I've been thinking about a lot lately as I've been reading about the Battle of Shiloh. So this is just my opinion on the Battle of Shiloh. Here it is. The Federal Army of the Tennessee should be the highest rated army at the Battle of Shiloh. Fact. Let me present you some numbers here. The Army of the Tennessee fought at the Battle of Shiloh against the Army of the Mississippi. Now in these games, the WDS series, the Army of the Tennessee is rated 3.59. Now, I'm not going to get into how I get to these ratings. It's just a bunch of math and it's not all that interesting. Nonetheless, a 4 rating is the equivalent of an average unit. So they aren't even rated average, they're rated below average. The Army of the Mississippi, the army that lost the battle, is rated 4.19. What? Do you want to hear something else interesting? Only 17% of the Army of the Mississippi had seen action before the Battle of Shiloh. This was an incredibly green, untried army in April of 1862, and it showed at the Battle of Shiloh. It took them 2 days to march 20 miles to attack Grant's army. If this is 1863 or 1864, they make that march before lunch. But it took them 2 days just to get there. I know it was raining. I know there was some confusion. You know where that confusion came from? They didn't know what they were doing. It was a green army. Now, compare that to the Army of the Tennessee. 50% of the Army of the Tennessee had seen action before at a place you've probably heard of. It's called Fort Donelson. You know how many veterans in the Army of the Mississippi had fought at Fort Donelson? None. They were all captured there. That's the problem. The Army of the Mississippi had no real veterans in it. Sure, 17% had seen some action. You know, at places like Belmont, or maybe over at Mill Springs, or maybe, Sam Watkins was with the 1st Tennessee at First Bull Run. But there wasn't much experience in the Army of the Mississippi. Veterans were few and far between. I'm not even going to talk about the Army of the Ohio because you know what the most insulting part about this entire thing is? The Army of the Ohio is rated 3.68. What in the world did the Army of the Ohio do to get a better rating than the Army of the Tennessee? They were even less experienced than the Army of the Mississippi. I mean, the Army of the Ohio, they fought some skirmishes in West Virginia. I mean, that's it. That's their claim to be an experienced army at the Battle of Shiloh. They fought some skirmishes in West Virginia in 1861. Come on. I don't know what to say. They're just wrong. The Army of the Ohio should be the lowest. The Army of the Mississippi should be between the Tennessee and the Ohio. And the Army of the Tennessee should be rated the highest. It's that simple. Let me give you some more information here. All right, this is just one example. I'm just going to pick on it, all right? Because it's bugging me. So we have Bowen's Brigade. Bowen's Brigade is made up of these 4 regiments at the Battle of Shiloh. They're all rated B, which is above average, right? Now we have Whittlesey's Brigade. Now, they're part of Lew Wallace's division, and there are their ratings. Now, guess which brigade fought at the Battle of Fort Donelson? This is a simple question. Obviously, it's not the Confederates. They'd be in a prison camp. It's Whittlesey's Brigade, and they fought well at Fort Donelson. And yet, all of them are rated below the untried forces of Bowen's Brigade. How is that possible? It doesn't make sense. So maybe you're thinking, well, maybe Bowen's Brigade has better commanders. All right, well then, how much do unit commanders factor into the ratings for these games? Brigadier General John Bowen. He would fight well at Shiloh and beyond. He would meet an untimely end after the Vicksburg campaign due to disease, but he was a very reliable brigade commander. On the Federal side, Charles Whittlesey. Who is that? Well, Charles Whittlesey did have a West Point education, and he did fight at the Battle of Fort Donelson. So between these two, as they're coming into the Battle of Shiloh, yeah, Bowen would go on to have the better career, but Charles Whittlesey isn't exactly a nobody. He did have a military education. So then let's turn to the regimental commanders, because maybe the Confederates just had better unit commanders than did the Federals. John Bowen's Brigade. These are his regimental commanders. Do you recognize any of those names? You shouldn't. If it weren't for the fact that they fought at the Battle of Shiloh and commanded these units, there would be no reason that we would remember these names. This is not an impressive group. Now, Whittlesey's Brigade. Do these names look familiar? They should, because all of them would go on to become a major general in the Federal armies by 1865. This is an incredibly talented group of regimental commanders in Whittlesey's Brigade, and yet they're rated lower than Bowen's Brigade. I just don't understand it. My opinion is that ratings should be based on the reputation and history of the individual unit going into the battle, not how they performed in that battle. And that might be controversial to some. And I'll probably bring this up in a future episode. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring this up in a future episode because it doesn't make sense. Whittlesey's Brigade going into the Battle of Shiloh had a far better reputation, and they had a far more impressive history than did Bowen's Brigade. And yet they're rated lower. Explain that, because I don't understand it. As another example from modern times, right? We all watch college football here in America. If number 1 Georgia is playing in a game with number 10 Notre Dame, or whomever, right? And halfway through the game, Notre Dame is up 14-3. You don't suddenly re-rank the teams and go, well, coming into this game, we thought Georgia was going to be number 1, but they're losing to Notre Dame right now. So we're going to move Georgia to number 7. And we're going to move Notre Dame up to number 4 at halftime, just because we feel like one's having a better game than the other, and we'll reevaluate maybe at the end of the third quarter. That's not the way it works. When you go into that game, you go into it with the rating that you had earned up to that point. After that game, you can reevaluate. I feel like these games should be the same way. Whittlesey's Brigade should be rated higher than Bowen's based on what they had done up to that point. Now, here's another example of what I'm talking about going back to the Civil War. The 25th Missouri. 514 men, rated B. It is only one of 3 federal units in the entire battle with a rating of B. Why? The 25th Missouri was a completely green unit at the Battle of Shiloh. What did they do at the Battle of Shiloh? Well, half their regiment got sent out, and they were part of the reconnaissance unit that stumbled upon the Confederate Army in the pre-dawn hours. And while, that's an important footnote to the battle, it doesn't really scream to me that they're an elite unit that deserve to be as highly rated as a few of Grant's veterans from Fort Donelson, and definitely not higher than Whittlesey's Brigade. So I'm not really understanding what makes the 25th Missouri an above average unit, because sure, they stumbled upon the Confederate advance, and then they retreated back to their camps and were soon routed and eventually captured at the Hornets' Nest. So excuse me for thinking that the 25th Missouri is pretty overrated here. This is a large outlier, especially given the fact that the rest of Prentice's division is rated abysmally overall, and they should be. They were a completely fresh, green, disorganized unit. Prentice's division, with this outlier involved, is rated a 3.29, the worst in the entire Federal Army. They are not a good unit. But if you take this B unit and you just make them a C, let's be generous. Let's rate them just average, right? The rating of Prentice's division goes down to a 3.14, which is even obviously lower. That's probably more where they belong. So some of these unit ratings, they just don't match historically with what that unit was going into the battle. Now, here's a bit of a disclaimer, because I know some people are thinking I'm being a little bit harsh here. Well, it is true. There is no way that you can really grade Civil War units in these games, because you know what? After all, this is just a video game, and we do have to grade them in order to play the game. It's just part of the system, and I think it's something that we all enjoy. It gives us something to argue about and something to talk about. And no two people will ever agree on all the ratings of the individual units involved in a certain battle. And just to wrap it all up here with my final opinions. Everyone, although they can't agree on each individual unit, should be able to see the wisdom of the overall Army ratings at the end of the day. That just seems obvious, right? And when you look at the Battle of Shiloh and the two armies involved, chiefly the Army of the Tennessee and the Army of the Mississippi, there's no comparison. The Federal Army of the Tennessee should be the highest rated army at the Battle of Shiloh. I mean, you want to argue? Let's argue. I'll argue that point all day long, and I'm going to win, because it's just not comparable. Ratings should be based, as I've said before, on the reputation and history of the unit going into that battle, not on how they performed in that battle. Trust me, we're going to come back to that topic in a future episode. I'm just going to hammer it home again here, though, at the end, because I feel that is really important. Alright, I hope you guys have enjoyed my opinion here on this episode of A Game in a Chair. I'm going to do these from time to time. It really felt good to get that off my chest. I've been holding that in for a while, and I know it's going to be unpopular, and if you hate my opinion, that's fine. Put it in the comments down below. Tell me. I mean, if you can find some evidence that says the Army of the Mississippi should be rated higher than Grant's veterans, feel free to put that in the notes, and I'd be happy to read it and chuckle, and I'll probably reply. But I just, my opinion, I can't figure out why Grant's army is rated lower. I mean, they're rated lower than the Army of the Ohio. I mean, just think about that. I'm done with that. So, thank you for watching, everybody. I sure hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like this video. I will have more episodes coming up in the future, and that is why you should subscribe to this channel. You'll get notifications when new videos drop, so you can log in and watch them and learn more about the American Civil War Gaming Club and these wonderful WDS games, which I do love so much. Thank you for watching, and I will see you back here next time, and until then, just keep gaming.